If you want to get your energy and your focus back and begin to start feeling great again, I'm going to show you the 3 simple steps that you can take to get your stress and your cortisol levels back on track. I have seen so many people struggle needlessly because cortisol was never addressed early on. And the cortisol test that was done and told to them was normal often isn't. In this video, I'm going to show you the exact system that I have used with my patients for decades to measure, interpret, and manage stress and cortisol. And by the end of this video, you'll understand how cortisol testing works and how you can use it to begin to get your health back on track. Because the truth is this: there are thousands of people walking around with dysfunctional cortisol patterns who have no idea that it is happening. And as a result, they struggle with a wide range of symptoms. Headaches and muscle aches, mood changes like depression and anxiety, chronic infections, fatigue, poor sleep, low libido. Yet most people have never had their cortisol measured correctly. And even when they have had it measured, it's often done the wrong way. So in this video, I'm going to share with you the 3-step system that I've refined over a 30-year medical career to understand cortisol properly. And by the end of this video, you'll understand how cortisol fits into the big picture of health and healing and what the first steps are to begin correcting it. Now, cortisol is best known as our fight or flight hormone. It raises our pulse and our blood pressure, dilates our eyes, it makes us extremely vigilant, and it shuts down the blood flow to our gut. Interestingly, many of these same effects that cortisol uses to keep us alive in stressful situations are exactly the same symptoms that people experience when cortisol stays elevated for too long. Now, imagine that you are wandering through your local jungle. This was thousands of years ago. This was long before refrigerators or drive-through restaurants. You're hungry. You haven't found any food for some time. And at this moment, your body is responding to its greatest stressor, which is the inability to find food. In this situation, cortisol rises and begins to liberate the energy that we have stored previously. It pulls calories from our fats, it pulls minerals from our bone, and it pulls amino acids from our muscles. And it does this so that the body can keep functioning when we can't find food. Cortisol essentially melts the body to keep us alive. And in doing so, it affects nearly every organ system in the body. It influences the brain and our cognition. It promotes a more diabetic state by raising our body's blood sugar. It suppresses our immune system, and it clouds our thinking. And finally, it reduces the blood flow to our gut and to our extremities. The first step in correcting cortisol is simply recognizing that you might have a cortisol dysfunction. So often, this is not even brought into the thought process of mainstream medicine. So if you're struggling with a wide variety of symptoms that don't seem connected, and your doctor has done a bunch of testing and told you that everything looks normal, then it's time for you to consider measuring your cortisol levels correctly. Now, the second step is how to measure cortisol the right way. And many people watching this video have had their cortisol measured before, and they were told that their cortisol was normal. But most of the time, this test is a single morning blood cortisol draw, and this tells us almost nothing. It's kind of like watching one scene from a movie and assuming that you know the entire plot. Cortisol follows what is known as a diurnal rhythm. This means that the levels of cortisol secreted by the adrenal glands rise and fall throughout the day. One of the most significant increases in our cortisol levels, it's almost 5 times the amount secreted during the day, happens between 3 and 6 in the morning. Why is this? This is because during that time, our body has been fasting for many hours. Ancestrally, we went to sleep when the sun went down, and by the wee hours of the morning, we had been fasting for somewhere between 8 and 10 hours. At this time, cortisol rises to maintain our blood glucose so our brain and our organs continue to function well. So now it makes sense why one isolated measurement done at 8 o'clock in the morning doesn't tell us the entire cortisol story. A 4-part salivary cortisol test measures cortisol throughout the entire day. This allows us to see whether cortisol is normal, elevated, flattened, or rising at the wrong times. For example, if cortisol spikes in the evening, it should be no surprise that this person struggles to fall asleep. Now, the third step is the interpretation of the cortisol pattern. And there are 4 common cortisol patterns that I have seen in my history. Now, the first is a normal cortisol curve, but sadly, these are more and more uncommon. The next most common cortisol pattern is when the cortisol is elevated during part, or unfortunately sometimes all of the day. This can be seen with a high, low, or normal DHEA. Another pattern is low cortisol, and this is where the body can no longer produce enough cortisol when it's needed, and typically these people are wiped out through the course of the day. And here I typically expect to see a downtrending or low DHEA. And the final characteristic pattern is when cortisol appears normal overall, but it reflects persistent spikes during a certain part of the day. Oftentimes this is in the evening. When cortisol rises at night, people frequently describe the same experience. They're exhausted. They want to try to get to sleep, but their minds won't turn off. Most people are actually surprised by what their cortisol pattern turns out to be. Now, if you're curious about what your cortisol patterning looks like, I've set up something special where I can personally review your cortisol pattern with you, and I can help you to relate how cortisol and stress are affecting your overall health journey. So check out the link below, and I will show you how to measure your cortisol properly and begin to start getting it back in balance. Now that you understand cortisol testing, the next question is, where does cortisol fit into the big picture of health? Cortisol, along with thyroid and insulin, sit at the foundation of my health systems pyramid. These 3 hormones regulate how your body utilizes energy, and until they are aligned, it's very difficult for the higher systems of the body to function well. Remember, nutrition is found at and forms the base of the pyramid. And then we need to establish our metabolic energy and energetic balances with insulin, cortisol, and thyroid. And only after those layers are working properly can more advanced systems like gut health, immune function, detoxification, and our sex hormones and mood begin to stabilize. Now that you understand how important cortisol is, the next step is understanding how cortisol and DHEA interact with one another. And that is exactly what I cover in the next video listed below.